Awesome. Well, look, thanks very much, everybody. I'm really excited to have this. Seb and I caught up a couple of weeks ago talking about Let's Get Wellington Moving, and he said, look, we're always looking at opportunities to be able to engage with folks who are in the community around the work that's going on with Let's Get Wellington Moving. As sort of, as we all know, it's been it kind of got announced, and then it's taken a little while to get spooled up, and so we're really excited. The Golden Mile is obviously the first kind of big project that's going on in this space, so we thought we'd test having some engagement with the urban nerd community, who I know are very interested in this topic, as you guys probably heard. I believe that this will be introduced by Seb, and then Seb will kind of hand it off to the others. So maybe we'll start off with you, Seb, and then you can explain how you're planning on doing this. The plan is to go from here, obviously, into some clarifying questions, then a couple of breakout rooms, and then come back and have a kind of a wider discussion. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. And if you would like to drop in some quotes, etc., for Joel, etc., just drop them into the chat as well. But other than that, Seb, it's yours. Go wild.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Oliver, and thanks everyone for coming along tonight. Yeah, look, my role is engagement across the Let's Get Wellington Moving program. So always looking for opportunities to connect with the likes of yourselves and others. So please be in touch if you think there's another opportunity for us to work together. I'm just going to do a very quick overview of the program before handing over to the actual nerds from our side anyway, Rowan and Selwyn, who will talk you through the Golden Mile concepts. So who's running the PowerPoint? Could you just flick through, maybe just flick through to the next one, next one, next one, next one. So look, I'm gonna. Oh, sorry. If you go go back one more, I'm going to make the assumption that there's a general level of understanding around the Let's Get Wellington Moving program. But look, just to remind everyone of the context, this is a huge opportunity for Wellington, our region. It's a 20-year, $6.4 billion investment program, and it's this is an opportunity once in a generation. So we really need to work together to make the most of this opportunity. The Golden Mile is just but one of the projects that's part of this program, and there will be plenty more stuff and content and projects for us to talk more about later, which I'm really looking forward to. But look, I'll leave it there and hand over to Rowan and Selwyn now, because they are the experts on the Golden Mile. So over to you guys.
Hi, Isabella. Am I able to grab control off you rather than you having to control the screen? I've just requested.
Yep, should be working for you now.
So, great. Gone a bit too fast. Okay, thanks, Sid. And sorry. If I can just go back one. Right. Okay. Hopefully it's not too sensitive. As Seb mentioned, the Golden Mile project is the first of the early delivery, one of the first of the early delivery projects to proceed. The project itself at the moment is it's all about a business case. Following the business case, there will be a detailed design phase that would follow the business case and approvals around the business case, and following that there would be a construction period based on the previous decision-making processes. In terms of the business case and what we're looking to deliver, just as a sort of a quick overview before I take you through a couple of slides that give a little bit more detail around some of the work that we have completed to date. So some of you recall that at the back end of last year, November, December, that the Let's Get Wellington Moving program went out some initial engagement around the Golden Mile and sought people's views on what they saw the priorities on the Golden Mile and what they wished for the Golden Mile. So that occurred over the November to December period. Following that, and the start of the business case process, one of the first things we did was develop a vision statement and a strategic case. Following that piece of work, we then went into a long and shortlisting process where we looked at various options and we packaged those up into the concepts that we're out with public engagement at the moment. At this point, we're in the public engagement process and we're engaging on the 3 concepts. As I think you mentioned, Oliver, that we're about a week away from closing that public engagement process. Following public engagement, we'll go into a process where we'll take that feedback on board and we will make a recommendation of an option or options to the Let's Get Wellington Moving team. And they will also liaise with their investment partners. Now, the investment partners are Wellington City, Greater Wellington Regional Council, as well as NZCA. So following identification of a recommended option, we will then complete the business case and submit that business case through to the partners in either September or sort of the October period of time. So not too far away through there. So just to track back, reflect back on some of the processes that we've been through. Going back to November and December at the end of last year, we asked the Wellingtonians what they wanted to prioritise for the Golden Mile. And some of the key feedback we received was around removing private motor vehicles, either full or some of the time, more cycle lanes, creating more space for people to dwell, wider footpaths and bus stops, removing street clutter, more cycle lanes, and then also priority at traffic lights and signals. Sorry about that. So the one of the first steps in the business case process itself was developing a vision statement. And that vision is about connecting people across the central city with a reliable transport system that is in balance with an attractive pedestrian environment. The next step in the business case process was to develop some problem statements. The first problem statement that we developed up was around slow and unpredictable bus travel times. Now, when I think about this particular problem statement, I think of examples such as conflicts with vehicles parking and accessing loading bays, closely located bus stops, delays at traffic signals due to general traffic movements, turning movements, inefficient boarding and lighting or getting on and off buses, particularly at bus stops, the bus stops themselves being at or near capacity. The second problem statement was around inadequate provision for pedestrians along the Golden Mile and across the Golden Mile. Some of the examples I think about when I think of this particular problem statement include crowding around bus stops, impeding walking along the Golden Mile, insufficient footpath width, street clutter, long wait times at traffic signals, leading to risky crossing behaviour, high number of pedestrians and vehicles leading to conflicts such as crashes. The third problem statement was around street layout limiting the attractiveness of the Golden Mile itself. Some examples of this particular problem include platoons of buses reducing the amenity of the Golden Mile, visual and physical clutter reducing enjoyment of the Golden Mile, insufficient space to dwell, and in some locations, poor air quality. The next step in the business case process was to develop up some investment objectives. And the way I look at these investment objectives is I group them into 2 and roughly split them down about 50% each. The first 2 on your screen on the left-hand side are all about improving bus travel times and bus reliability along the Golden Mile, and that's for the users, bus users. Now, the one point I would make about the Golden Mile itself is it's a vital cog in the bus network, not just for people arriving and departing from the Golden Mile, and think of Lambton Quay when I say that. It's also part of the wider network and it's important from a functionality perspective for how the bus network works for the city and the wider region as well. The 3 other investment objectives to the right of my screen are all about improving the pedestrian environment and a place to spend more time in as well. The importance, just before I move off this slide, the importance of the investment objectives is twofold. Firstly, they've helped shape our options and our programs. And secondly, they also help us shape our decision-making framework as well. So we now got to the point of public engagement, and we have 3 concepts that have been out for engagement for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Concept 1 is streamline, concept 2 is prioritise, and concept 3 is transform. Now the feedback we get through the engagement process will help our decision making, and that was the decision making processes I talked about occurring pretty much in August. And the one point I will make is that the preferred option could well end up being a combination of the concepts themselves. And for example, it could be option 2 on Lambton Quay and option 3 on Courtenay Place as an example of a mixing and matching process that we might go through during the period of August. However, before we get into the concepts themselves, there are some common features to all of the concepts. The first feature is that there will be a change to general traffic access arrangements on the Golden Mile, except there will always be emergency vehicle access provided under any of the concepts. The second key feature is consolidating bus stops to improve bus reliability. We'll always maintain a 5-minute walk zone around each bus stop, and that's for someone with average walking speeds. And the third common feature will be around creating more footpath space for everyone, and that will incrementally increase from concepts 1 to 2 to 3. And we create that space by removing on-street car parking, relocating loading zones and taxi stands to side streets. We'll also increase amenity by closing some of the ends of the side streets. So that's, when I refer to that, just to be really, really clear, it's the ends of the side streets that connect into Lambton Quay, or into the Golden Mile itself. It's not the whole side street. So moving on to the concepts. First one is streamline. So streamline involves reducing general traffic access to the Golden Mile. So the access will be retained on Courtenay Place, Willis Street and Lambton Quay. However, access will be removed from Manor Street. And that's, if you're on Manor Street now in a private motor vehicle and you're heading towards Cuba Street, you can still make that movement at the moment, but under Concept 1, you won't be able to do that. Another point I'd make about Lambton Quay is if you're heading northbound, you won't be able to make some of the right-hand turns that you can currently do on Lambton Quay if you're heading towards Parliament. If you're heading south from Parliament along Lambton Quay, there'll be some left in and left out turning arrangements through there. We will look to close some side streets or the ends of those side streets. Particularly, we'll be looking to close Blair, Allen and Cuba Street, as well as Mercer Street. And there'll be those turning restrictions that I talked about on Lambton Quay as well, both southbound and northbound. We'll look to convert car parks to footpaths and relocate loading zones and taxi stands to side streets. And that should give us around about 30% more footpath space. We'll also look to consolidate those bus stops to improve bus reliability and to increase the space in and around the bus stops themselves. And we'll maintain that no more than a 5-minute walk zone for each of those bus stops. In terms of some cross sections, and you may have seen these on the website, on the Let's Get Wellington Moving website, but we've come up with some cross sections for Lambton Quay and Courtenay Place. The first one here is Lambton Quay looking towards the harbour. No particular location, but the key features you'll see here is access for all vehicles, as well as buses. You can see up to the top of the screen there, the dotted black lines are around allowing left in and left out arrangements. But really the key common feature here is all vehicles retain access on Lambton Quay. Moving on to Courtenay Place, again looking towards the harbour, the other key feature is access for all vehicles on Courtenay Place. Some side road closures there, and to the left-hand side there is Tory Street, or could be an image of Tory Street, where north-through traffic, north-south traffic would be retained. Moving on to Concept 2, prioritise. Under concept 2, all general traffic would be removed from the Golden Mile. Key feature of concept 2 is 2 bus lanes in each direction on Courtney Place and Lambton Quay. We would close the side roads that we talked about and have proposed in concept 1, Blair, Allen and Cuba and Mercer Streets. It will also close Balance, Stout, Waring Taylor, Johnson, Brandon and Panama Streets on Lambton Quay. We look to convert those car parks, on-street car parks to footpaths and relocate those loading zones and taxi stands to side streets as well under this concept. We also look to consolidate bus stops to improve bus reliability and to increase the space around the bus stops as well. So looking at concept 2 in Lambton Quay, looking towards the harbour, you can see the key feature there being 2 bus lanes in either direction along Lambton Quay. Side roads closed at the ends. And again, a very similar feature for Courtney Place, 2 bus lanes in either direction on Courtney Place. Again, Tory Street could be left for through traffic or north-south traffic. Moving on to concept 3. Transform. Again, this involves removing all general traffic along the Golden Mile. Key difference between options for concepts 2 and 3 is that for concept 3, there'll be 1 bus lane in each direction. So that means buses will need to stop in line to be able to pick up and drop off people. There'll be the same side roads closed as concept 2. Plus under this, we will also look to close Tory Street north and south for through movements. We look to convert footpaths and relocate loading zones. I'll go back. Convert car parks to footpaths and relocate loading zones and taxi stands to side streets. Under concept 3 though, we will generate more footpath space and we are predicting up to 75% more footpath space will be created under transform. Sorry, it's not me touching that, someone else's. Also under this concept, we'll be looking to consolidate the bus stops to improve bus reliability and to increase space at and around bus stops, no more than that 5-minute walk zone. One other key feature and difference with concept 3 is that we would be looking to provide some dedicated space for cycling on Courtney Place, particularly on the southern side of Courtney Place. And there's also opportunity on Lambton Quay, north of Panama Street, to provide some cycling or a shared path there as well. The point I make about Courtney Place is it's been identified as part of the Wellington City Council's strategic cycling network. So we're at the moment looking to give effect to that particular plan moving forward. So under concept 3, we have the space to also provide some additional space for cycling. So again, looking at the cross sections, and this is transform looking towards the harbour on Lambton Quay, you can see the key feature through here being 1 bus lane in each direction. The additional point I would make under this concept is that there will be no raised or physical medium between the 2 bus lanes. This allows buses to pass safely if they can, or manoeuvre past parked buses, whether those buses are parked at bus stops, whether they're just parked and stopped in the middle of the lane. Provided they can make that movement safely, they can then just simply pass the parked bus stop. Other key features include additional space on Lambton Quay on the northern side, where additional space could be created for that shared path, as I mentioned before, for cycling and scootering if required. And moving on to Courtney Place, again, that key feature of 1 bus lane in each direction with no physical medium in between to allow buses to move past each other. The other key feature being a potential cycleway. You can see on the southern side of Courtney Place at that point, a dedicated space for cycling and scootering. And the other key feature there to the left hand of the image there is Toy Street being closed to through north-south traffic through there. And I think that brings us to the end of the technical presentation. So at this point, we usually ask questions. So I guess, Oliver, we can ask some clarification questions as you mentioned before. Or
yeah, absolutely.
Chat rooms from there.
Cool. Hey, thank you so much, Selwyn. This is great. Really, really interesting. There's a couple of dedicated questions, one from Mike Milor. So what we'll do again, folks, is we're going to go through this. I'll ask any clarifying questions here, sort of specific to this, and then what we'll do is we'll drop everybody into breakout rooms for about sort of 5 minutes just to chat through the options and what you like, what you didn't like, etc. And then we'll come back and be able to have a discussion and feedback from each of the groups. So specific question here from Mike Milor. Does the 5-minute walk time to bus stops include the maximum times needed to allow to cross the remaining side streets, e.g. Taranaki, Victoria and Whitmore?
I'll field that one, if that's all right. To answer that question, the 5-minute walk zones don't incorporate a nominal waiting time necessary to cross the intersections, simply because that waiting time may vary depending on which option we're looking at. For those options where we're removing a substantial amount of side roads, you would expect that walking times would be a lot easier than ones where side roads are maintained and you may need to stop for a minute. So the walking catchments are designed by, determined by a 5-minute walk without intersection delay, if that helps.
Without intersection delay. Okay.
Yep. So it's assuming a 5-minute walk.
And just to clarify as well, if we can go back to the first option, it looks like you keep more bus stops versus the transform where you keep less bus stops. But
that's correct.
In theory, there would also then you'd also have less waiting time as well, because those times would naturally you would have less and less and less time over time. You know, there would be less side streets to go across. So in theory, that should speed it up.
Yeah, that's correct. There's two elements with bus stops. The bus stop rationalisation allows us to position bus stops away from delay points. It's a bit counterintuitive, but the intent behind bus stop rationalisation and repositioning is to actually make the buses attend bus stops a lot faster. So the trade-off is, in some instances, certainly not all, there might be a marginal increase in walking distance, but the intent is to make the buses move much more quickly and much more reliably through the network, so that they're arriving and departing from those bus stops a lot more consistently and a lot quicker. So what that translates to customers is a shorter wait time.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. And then the other question from Mike is, under each of the options, what will happen to the bus routes that currently terminate on Brandon Street? And maybe for others, edification, including my own, where is Brandon Street?
So Brandon Street is it adjoins Lambton Quay. It's near the southern section of Lambton Quay.
Okay.
There's one bus route, I think there may be more, but there's one bus route I definitely know that terminates down there. There's a couple of options about how we might address that. One is to reroute the bus directly onto the mile, or to reroute it away from a Brandon Street termination. The other is to investigate whether Brandon Street can be designed to allow a bus to turn around there, although I would suggest it's probably something that needs to be fleshed out in detail. The bus is a big vehicle and has a big swept path. And the third option is to allow the bus to actually gain access across Brandon, but deny access to other vehicles.
Right, excellent. Are there any other specific clarifying questions anybody has that they wanted to put into the chat? No? Okay, excellent. So Isabella, are you able to, are you prepped for being able to drop us into some breakout rooms?
Please hold caller. Somebody sing a brief song so we have some hold music. I'm just going to stop screen sharing. Breakout.
Yeah. I just want to say, while I've got everybody's attention, I'm incredibly impressed with this. This is awesome. Really, really, really well done, guys. Team. I really appreciate the amount of effort that's gone into this, and it's very exciting. Really feels like the start of where people are, you know, the promise of Let's Get Wellington Moving is starting to come through.
Please don't be shy about asking questions. There's no such thing as a silly question.
Oh, right. Okay. Paul Bruce, what provision is there here for moving to light rail? Does that come up at all on the Golden Mile?
That's a difficult question to field. We don't have an alignment dedicated from that team. So there's obviously a second project underway around MRT and where that may go and what that may be. I would say generally that none of these options build that option away. But in terms of where a light rail alignment may need to go, there's obviously a lot to unpack in terms of not only the track alignments, but overheads, where it needs to be depoted, you know, how the vehicles themselves will move through the mile. So I would say that this project hasn't considered light rail as being a key component of it. But should that decision happen in the future, I don't think there's anything that would prevent it.
Yeah, just look to add to what Rowan just mentioned. Then light rail's going through its own, MRT to be correct, Mass Rapid Transit is going through its own business case process. The program business case identified key routes for the MRT. Taranaki, the keys are examples of where MRT might be heading. And I guess moving forward, probably the key point of difference is the Golden Mile project's more about what we can do in the next sort of 3 or 5 years to improve bus performance and pedestrian and walking and those investment objectives. Whereas the MRT project or the Mass Rapid Transit project's got a longer term view. And that's sort of more in the 10-year time frame. And that's simply because they've got to go through a couple of business case processes. They are very, very complicated processes to go through. And then they've got to go through detailed design and construction. So that's why there's a longer time frame for that particular project. But Let's Get Wellington Moving has kicked that project off, as many of you will know, along with some of those other projects like the State Highway project and the Thornton Key project as well.
Super.
Right.
Nice. How are we doing, Isabella?
If there are no more clarification questions, we can open the rooms. Oliver, how long do you want us to have in the breakout rooms?
I reckon sort of 5 minutes, and if we have groups of, say, 3 or 4, would that work?
Copy that.
Excellent. Okay, thanks very much. Talk to you soon, guys.
Cool. Very cool.
Right, kia ora. Libby and Davinia. The random assignment of the people to the breakout rooms has put us in together. I'm actually just going to I'm just going to move a couple of people. Please hold. So what happened there? Okay, can you both hear me? I might to make sure that Libby is actually in this room. Libby, come in. Do you receive? Is this the version of you that has the audio associated?
but it's exclusively for buses, does that actually improve capacity versus, for example, just having the transform option where you've got a single lane for each bus, but they can get around the other buses? Do you think that it's going to result in a substantial improvement in terms of capacity for the roads?
So, are you okay for me to answer that one? Yep. So the main difference around option 2, and with respect to having double bus lanes there, is it gives us a little bit up our sleeve if we need to make allowance for other users in the site. So one of the things we've been wrestling with is how do we provide access for things like construction vehicles or armoured vehicles or delivery vehicles and things like that, particularly large vehicles that may not be accommodated in the side roads. So we anticipate that option 2 could be modified to give a bit more space to pedestrians if we need to, but we need to make allowance for those kind of uses in case we need to get them in the mile without blocking off other either the buses or pedestrians in a too negligible way. I would also say that with respect to bus operations on the mile, probably the biggest issue that we aren't going to solve in this project is Manners and Willis. Those 2 points are the most constrained positions on the network. So having a 2-lane cross-section at Courtenay gives us a lot up our sleeves in terms of capacity and resilience and being able to adjust things at those ends, but we're still going to run into that same bottleneck in and around Manners and Willis. And that's simply a function of the limited cross-section that's available there. There's a few things we can do to fix things, but there's no silver bullet to fix that problem.
Excellent. And the other part about it as well is, in theory, if you've got a bike lane coming up to the end of Lambton, and this is in transform option number 3, if you've got a bike lane coming up to the end of Lambton, and then you've got another one coming up Courtenay, how do those two connect? Because it feels a little bit like a motorway that goes down to a gravel road at this stage, because there's no real connection, right?
Yeah, and you've sort of hit the nail on the head with respect to Lambton. So the strategic cycle network directs cyclists up Dixon Street from Courtenay. What we're trying to avoid is directing cyclists onto Willis Street or Manners Street, where it's obviously going to be a problem. So that is one of the tensions around providing a dedicated cycle facility on Lambton, is where does it go? And to be honest, we don't have that answer yet. We'd need to really work with the cycle team to understand what's the safest and best route to enable that use to go for. Courtenay Place has been designed, and we do know where it's going.
Yeah, and just to add to Ron's comments, Lambton Quay is not part of the strategic cycling network. Featherston is. I know there's challenges around the design of Featherston, but that's where Wellington City wants the main cycle route to be. So Lambton Quay, hence Lambton Quay being more about a shared space. Yeah.
When you say there's a challenge with the design, is that because there's pushback from retailers, or is that just because there's are there actual logistical challenges for the design?
For Lambton Quay?
No, for Featherston.
Oh, for Featherston. I'm not across the details of that, but Featherston's one way. And if you contemplated providing bi-directional facilities on Featherston, you've got that obvious challenge of having cyclists going in the opposite direction to general traffic. So there's more work to be done by the City Streets team on Featherston, and whether that can be accommodated, but whether the option Lambton Quay can assist in that development of that work could well do. At the moment, the strategic cycle network is on Featherston Street. Obviously, you can cycle in one direction at the moment, but there is some talk about bi-directional as well. But that's, as I said, that's got design challenges. Actual design challenges there.
Whatever we do with respect to cyclists, and this is a tension that would be there with Courtenay and Lambton, is because they're such high pedestrian environments, we need to make sure that we're not creating a high-speed conflict between pedestrians that might want to cross the street and cyclists that might be ripping along there at 20 kilometres or 30 kilometres an hour. You don't want to create another safety issue there. So if a cycling provision is made, and it's a dedicated cycling provision, we need to consider how we control the speeds of those vehicles to make it safe for people that might be moving through the site, that might have mobility impairments or other issues that could create a problem.
Great. There's feedback here from Paul Bruce saying contraflow cycling is not a real problem. Paris has many side roads with contraflow cycling. All right. Well, look, are there any other specific clarifying questions? Otherwise, what I'll do is I'd like to have every group just report back on where their conversation went and, generally speaking, what people were in support of. So if we want to go with what was breakout room 1, I don't know who was in that.
Unfortunately, I didn't write down who was in the different breakout rooms. So should we perhaps, and I suspect nobody else remembers either, but
Yeah.
should we
Okay.
just randomly pluck some people from the array of those who are left?
Yeah, absolutely. Meta, do you want to talk to your group's discussion?
To be honest, not.
Okay. Is there anybody who would like to?
Yeah, I think it was actually just 3 of us.
Oh, great. Yep.
Myself. So, and I think Meta mentioned that she had an internet connection problems. So, Mark might be able to chime in with a little summary.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, hello. Am I on? Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. So I dug around to write some submission guides for Cycle Wellington earlier in the week, and I found the shortlist and the long list documents, which are in behind the sort of public-facing Your Voice website, which provides a whole heap of research and detail that's gone into the business cases for these options. I was just asking a bit more about how it was distilled down from that enormous amount of amazing research and images, and it's a really amazing piece of work. And so, yeah, it was a bit more of a meta discussion in that respect. But Meta did have some good questions around accessibility. It was both accessibility for less able people for travelling along these streets in the Golden Mile, but also accessing businesses in those areas. So I think Selwyn echoed the fact that that's been a key theme of feedback so far. And making sure that the side roads have provision for people to get quite close to Golden Mile businesses or facilities, not necessarily businesses. Yeah, so that's been a key theme of feedback. I think that's a good summary. Sorry, it's quite a long summary.
Yep. Excellent. Great. Leisha, are you able to report back, or are you in the middle of stuff? Middle of dinner. Okay. Mike?
We lost Paul in the middle of it, so we're not sure what Paul's pearls of wisdom are going to be. But the main discussion was about how buses get through on the comparing option 2 and option 3 with the 4 lanes in option 2 and the 2 lanes in option 3. And that was really a discussion. I don't think there was anything. We didn't come to any conclusions, but there was a good bit of elaboration. I mean, one of the points that Rowan made was that the 1 lane each way is not got a lot of resilience to it, and that the point you just made now, that the 2 lanes each way on Courtney Place and Lambton Quay do provide a buffer, which I hadn't really thought of, to enable the narrow congested bits to operate better.
You're saying that's at the moment for where for Manners and Willis, you mean at the moment, or you're saying that you're worried about it was that's what it was in the you were worried about for on Lambton and Courtney?
Well, I'm concerned that 4 on Lambton and Courtney is about as much tarmac as we've got now, and it will look like tarmac with footpaths attached rather than a pedestrian space that buses happen to go through. I think that's an important. How it looks is important. I mean, Manners Street currently looks bloody awful to my mind. The way it's just a road ploughed through what looks like a main road. The treatment there is something I think needs to be thought carefully about what the place looks like and what it feels like, because that's the way people will respond to and will use it.
Excellent, thanks. Excellent. And any other groups that I have missed? How many groups were there in total, Isabella? Do you know?
We had 3 operational ones, and then we had half of Libby and me left in the main room.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, I think in our group we talked through the questions that I had sort of mentioned, and I think Paul also wanted to talk about the making sure that we don't. Making sure that we have provision for MRT, and his wish had been that we looked at it as making sure that if we do end up with an MRT, that it doesn't drag people too far away from the centre, like that it goes where the people are. Would that be an accurate assessment there, Paul?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Excellent. Great. Well, look, I've got 1 or 2 questions in here as well. Guy Marriage, what happens in option 3 if the buses break down? Will that be a showstopper? And I just wanted to check in with either Selwyn or Rowan about that.
Yeah, so the main point I'd mention with option 3 is we're actually building the carriageway out from one side. So we want to retain the median because it's got some nice trees in it. But from a bus geek perspective, which is where I come from, the 2 lanes without a median is critical to make sure that you've got some level of redundancy. Should a vehicle break down, the other one can move into the other lane. Because general traffic is excluded, you can actually manage the operations and buses will let other buses through. That said, there is some design up our sleeve to allow indents to get a bit more capacity in there. I would stress that scenario currently exists on Manners. If a bus breaks down there, we've got a world of problems. But yeah, there's definitely options in terms of option 3 to help mitigate that. Option 2 obviously provides you with a lot more in terms of additional capacity there.
Excellent. That's great. Excellent. Well, look, I was going to say, is there any questions that Libby, yourself, Seb, you or others have for us as a group that you would like to have any specific feedback on?
Can I chime in?
Yeah, absolutely. Go on.
One of the things I'm really interested in is desire lines. Sorry if that's geeky speak, but particularly with option 2 and 3, where we're removing signalised intersections, there's an opportunity to align safe pedestrian crossings, principally across the mile, to where people need to go. And I'm really interested in trying to work out, rather than constricting people to crossing where the intersections allow, if we need to provide crossing facilities, which we do for people, where can we actually position them so that they work best for people? Where do people need to travel to and from?
So is there a question there around, are there specific crossings that you think should be put in or removed or better augmented?
Yeah, so if you currently want to cross Lambton Quay, by way of example, at the moment you might need to walk down Lambton Quay, walk along the length of Lambton Quay to find an intersection that's safe to cross, travel across it, and then walk back to get to your destination. If you had the freedom to position signalised crossings, pedestrian crossings, anywhere you wanted along the mile, where do they need to go? Is it, for example, aligned with Woodward Street and going across a lane like that? That's the kind of thinking that I'm really interested in exploring.
I have one very specific one that I'd love to put out, which is that at the moment, if you walk through the old Hannah's building, then you can cross across, I don't know the name of it, forgive me, and then it goes across to Manners Street. But it's a way to connect at the moment. You go through Leeds Street.
Opera House Lane.
Opera House Lane, there we go. So at the moment you can go across, and there's no crossing through there, but it's actually a really beautiful way to get through the city if you don't want to walk down really highly pedestrianised Cuba Street and you don't want to walk down Taranaki Street because it's got terrible pedestrian facilities. So a lot of people walk down that route, but then as soon as they get there, there's no pedestrianised crossing whatsoever across that area. And then you walk across it through the toilets, which is fine, that's not an issue. And then you get across to Manners, and there's nothing that would indicate that there's a crossing there whatsoever. And that, if you're talking about desire lines, I think could be a really beautiful pedestrianised space that would provide a way to connect the waterfront to the rest of the city.
That's through Te Aro Park. Am I thinking the right place there?
Yeah.
Yep.
You've also got desire lines as you're going along Lambton Quay. I mean, most people stick to the west side at the moment, I guess. but the major draw card on the east side would be Davy Jones. And so there'll be a diagonal from about sort of half a block down where people would want to go towards Midland Park or David Jones, and then another one, the end of that going north again, northwest. So sort of that would be the pattern that I would go. So I never want to go right up, then go right angles across. I'd always sort of tend to do 45 degrees to the major draw cards. And so the major draw card would be the park, David Jones probably, because that's a major bus stop, and the cable car lane, and possibly Woodward Street. I mean, those would be apart from that, it's just shops.
Mm.
So those are the sort of features. So, and the shops will change over time, but something like the park won't.
There's also
Great, thank you.
Here to perhaps get out on the street, and I have already banged on at you folks enough about engagement, but perhaps there could be some kind of nifty, cheap little gimmick where you could put some things along the street that say, "Would you like to cross here?" And even if people take a selfie with the place that they would really like to cross, there could be a little bit of the old user-generated content there, which would engage people out on the street with the prospect of being able to cross the Golden Mile differently from how they do now. That would be quite neat.
Right.
Isabel, do you know if in the period where they were doing their extensive consultation, remember how people could make little suggestions along the street as to what was needed? Has anybody actually been through all of those, and are there any good suggestions in there?
That's definitely a question for the team.
Yes, the short answer is yes, absolutely. For those of you who are brave enough to have read the long list report, we actually started by creating what I've called a long list of interventions. So we basically went through and went, okay, what is a grab bag of ideas that we could apply along the Golden Mile? Some of those ideas were sourced from that community engagement. So we went through and went, okay, this is something we want to include, and then unpack it a bit and explore it. And indeed, you're seeing some of those ideas being transposed into the options.
If we have time for one last question, Oliver, how are we doing for time?
I think we're good. If we finish up in the next 5 minutes, we'll be fine. Yeah.
I've got a question, Oliver.
Yeah, go for it, Selwyn.
Bus stops and bus stop location preferences. We're talking about consolidating bus stops under each concepts. Is there any particular location that is a must-have for a bus stop? And the example I'm thinking about is Manor Street and Cuba Street and the bus stop there. Is that an absolute bus stop location for everyone, or could that be shifted somewhere else? Could that be shifted on to Courtney Place or deleted in general?
Perhaps we could pass the mic to the member of Greater Wellington's bus users group that we happen to luckily have in this hui. That's your cue, Mr. Mellor.
Are you talking about me?
Mm-hmm.
I think bus stops along the Golden Mile is a very interesting and vexed question. I mean, it's ideal to have bus stops in both directions that are in similar locations for a legibility point of view, and that's one thing that the Golden Mile apparently lacks. And one of the odd ones out that hasn't got a partner in the other direction is the Manners Street one, the Manners Street at Willis. Now, it's a heavily used bus stop. I use it myself a lot, probably the single most bus stop I use most. But it doesn't worry me that there isn't one in the opposite direction, because I go and use the one at Cuba Street instead, which is not that far away. So I wouldn't die in a ditch over it. But I think it is important to look. I don't know whether anybody's done a survey of where people are actually going to and from when they use those bus stops, which I think that would be quite useful. Not that easy, because it's not just along the Golden Mile that people are going to, it's also along the places that are off the Golden Mile, even through to the terrace, where there's all sorts of linkages through to the terrace through buildings, which are largely undocumented, many of them hidden, but a lot of them are actually required by their resource consents, which there'll be another useful piece of work to do. So The answer to your question is I don't know, really. It requires a lot of input from a lot of people and for you as a group to synthesize them, because there will be a lot of different approaches coming. But I think provided you get the 5 minutes, and picking up what Rowan said earlier, that 5 minutes has to be total time. That has to be the time that is included in waiting to cross streets. You can wait for 2 minutes to cross Taranaki Street, which will be an important link to get through to the stops. I think provided there's a realistic what it actually means to people time, that the detail of the stops will come out in the wash.
We have had a lot of debate within the project team about Manor Street because of the issue in terms of constraint. Because it's positioned next to Cuba Street, it's a really, really valuable pedestrian catchment area. People are walking along Cuba Street and got a lot of access to those stops. But in contrast, it's 2-lane, 2-way. If something goes wrong or there's issues there, you're obstructing every bus that comes behind it. You've also hit the nail on the head, by the way, with Taranaki Street. We can't significantly alter that intersection in its cross sections. It's a vital transport link, so it's not something we can reasonably close. And so there's always going to be a level of delay associated with people moving across that intersection, and that will remain. It might marginally improve if we do some clever things with the signal phasing, but the essence of people needing to cross that carriageway is going to be there. So yeah, I'm glad you said there was no silver bullet there, because we've certainly been wrestling with that as well.
Yeah, just in respect to Cuba Street, just remember that there's at least 3 universities up there. So there's Welltech, Victoria, and then Massey, all of whom use that. So there's a huge amount of students that get off around that junction between Cuba and Manners and walk up from there. So large user group.
And if I could just talk about Taranaki, there'll still be a lot of traffic going through it, but there won't be the turning movements that there are now. So there'll be scope for reducing the width of the carriageway from, 6-7 lanes to 2 each way or something like that, which will mean a shorter distance to cross, and ideally to restore the pedestrian refuges in the middle of it, so it's a less terrifying place to cross over. So while the signal cycle may not change that much, it should be easier to cross.
Great, thanks for the feedback.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. All right, folks. Well, look, I think we're about done up in terms of time. If there's anybody, as I mentioned before, who had a comment that they wanted to put in, I am going to be putting this to John, taking a bunch of notes and over the recording for tomorrow. And I know that he would love some quotes. If anybody has sort of specific things saying, hey, I really like this and this was good, or I wanted us to go a little bit further. I wanted to, transform it and only see UFOs. We probably won't put that one in, but, it would be great. So, yeah, if you could please drop those into the chat or send them to me privately by email, that'd be really useful. And then, folks, the other point as well, and Libby and the team have all kind of made this point to me, is the most useful thing that we can do as urban nerds is to go and submit. So if you haven't done a submission yet, please go and submit online. Now that you've seen the proposals and the different options, please ensure that you get that in. Libby or one of the team said, when do submissions close?
So at the end of this week, so I've just popped, or I will just pop a comment in the chat bar now with the website that you can go and pop your feedback into, but do feel free to just email us as well if you don't want to complete the full survey, or give us a bell. Anything's fine. Excellent. And is that, just out of curiosity, is that the same one that requires you to have that account through Wellington City Council, or is there a different submission process for Let's Get Wellington Moving? No, it's completely different. And I'll also just note that you don't need to complete the entire survey. If you just want to complete components of it, that's also fine. Excellent. Okay, that's really useful. Thanks very much, Libby. I really appreciate that. No problem. Cool. All right, great. Well, look, and that's also the case for anybody who's watching this recording. If you want to go and do that, go and check that out. I will, when I send this out, I'll include a link to that survey. Excellent. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, all.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Most appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes.
See ya.
Thank you.
Cheers.